Good evening, ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties. This is Alex coming at you from the underworld, and welcome back to another episode of At last it's February, which means this is the Women in Horror Month. And if you're already a fan of the horror genre, I'm sure you know the importance behind women in horror. However, if you're just now getting into the subject of horror, the importance of the women in horror is for the month of February, we showcase and spotlight those trailblazing ladies who contributed to the horror genre and proved that horror was not just a man's world. Now, to start things off, I decided this weekend I was going to review one of my favorite books by one of my favorite authors, which is Don't Look Now by Daphne du Maurier. And if you're unfamiliar with who Daphne du Maurier is, she was a trailblazer for many genres, and she was famous for kind of blending genres. Now, some of the genres that she contributed to was mystery, gothic romance, suspense, and just dark fiction in general. And among some of her most famous works, you have Don't Look Now, The Birds, and her masterpiece, which is known as Rebecca. And even though Rebecca is a phenomenal work, I really feel like it is too tame of a work to review for this channel. However, since it does have the elements of what could be a ghost story as well as a murder mystery, I would review that book if you requested me to do so. So if you would like for me to review it, just mention that in the comments. Now, as far as this weekend's book review goes, I chose Don't Look Now because it's a book that I don't really hear much about, and it's a shame because it has some of my favorite creepy stories in this collection. And as far as it showing du Maurier's diversity talents, this book is full of it because it's moody, it's brooding, it's gothic, and at times it's just downright creepy. Don't Look Now by Daphne du Maurier is a collection of short stories that range the author's career from beginning to end. And within this book, you're going to find some of the author's greatest nightmares ever put to page. Now, among the 9 stories here, we do have quite a bit of diversity, and we have stories that feature homicidal dwarfs, killer birds, murderous ladies, bizarre mountain cults, an eye operation gone horribly wrong, and many more subjects. Now, the stories here, they do really fit into the categories of murder mystery, suspense, or thriller more so than they do horror. But keep in mind, du Maurier knows how to walk that thin line between those genres and the horror genre. And at the end of the day, she knows how to invoke dread within the reader. Since this is a short story collection, I would like to focus on what inspired my 3 favorite stories within this book, which is Don't Look Now, The Birds, and Monte Verita. The Birds was first published in 1952 in the collection The Apple Tree, and it has a simple origin story as du Maurier said she became inspired to write The Birds because she saw a farmer getting attacked by a flock of seagulls. However, after reading the story, one can see it is a bird of many feathers, which I will discuss in the thoughts section. By the way, du Maurier hated the Hitchcock adaptation of her story. Don't Look Now was first published in 1971 in the collection Not After Midnight. Such as The Birds, this tale has a simple origin story as du Maurier said she wrote Don't Look Now after spending a holiday in Venice. While there, she encountered 2 elderly twins and mistook a dwarf as a child. Monte Verita was published alongside The Birds in The Apple Tree. Around this time, du Maurier wrote to a friend saying she had the best holiday ever as she went mountain climbing, and she described the experience as being heavenly. Here, she encountered a mountain that could easily have been her imaginary Monte Verita. This is the second time I've used Monster She Wrote to gather information about an author. So this is really a phenomenal book if you are wanting to get into the female literary trailblazers who contributed to horror and dark fiction. The first time I used this was when I reviewed the book The Woman in Black by Susan Hill, and when I decided that I was going to review Daphne du Maurier, I once again turned to this source material, which this provides great profiles on many different literary icons who are female. Daphne du Maurier, aka Dame Daphne du Maurier, aka Lady Browning, aka the Dame of Dread, grew up surrounded by arts and published her first novel at age 23. Throughout life, she was labeled by many as a tomboy, which she later referenced herself as a disembodied spirit since she believed her female body withheld a male soul. As du Maurier wrote fiction, she praised her male half as being the controlling force behind her storytelling. Upon becoming a literary icon, she was dismissed by the cultural establishment as they said she was too readable to be literary. And throughout her career, as readers loved her, critics continued snubbing her talents. Nonetheless, she wrote regardless of criticism and continued to create until her dying day. Aside from being an author, du Maurier was an essayist, a playwright, and a biographer. With all of that covered, it's now time that I move on to the spoiler section of this video, which if you've never read this book before, you're going to want to scroll down to the comments section and click on the timestamp that I have provided at the pinned comment that's available. This will remove you from the spoiler section and redirect you to the thoughts category. You only have 17 seconds to do this, so ready, set, go. Now that everyone has had a chance to click away, I would like to discuss 3 of my favorite stories and their twist endings. The reason why these stories really stood out to me is because they're so bleak and depressing, and the cherry on the cake is du Maurier was able to get this dark in a day and age where this was just not expected from female authors. So that was really awesome, and it really established her as a trailblazer, I do believe. Now, the first story I want to touch on is Don't Look Now, and the premise of this is you have a husband and wife named John and Laura, and they've gone to Venice on holiday because their daughter Christine has recently died of meningitis, so they're here trying to recuperate and just get into a good mindset. Well, while they're in Venice, they accidentally encounter a set of elderly twins where one of the twins is a psychic, and she reveals that their daughter Christine is still around them, and Christine is happy, she wants them to move on, and this gives Laura the closure she needs to be able to continue life. But John is a hardcore skeptic, so he's really not taking this seriously. Well, after that, a domino effect happens and it splits apart the husband and wife, and the husband goes running down the back alleys chasing this childlike figure, which the reader might think is his daughter Christine. And granted, he still is in the skeptical mindset here. But on the outskirts of the story, we have this indication that there is a serial killer at large. And as he's in the back alleys, he's chasing this childlike figure, and he finally gets alone with this childlike figure. And when the figure turns around, we discover that it's a homicidal dwarf who has been creating all of the murders that has shown up in the papers and spoken about with the citizens and such. So the thing that's so impactful with this and such a hard pill to swallow with this is du Maurier doesn't really ever lead on that John believes that this is the ghost of his daughter. But in the back of our minds, we're hoping as readers that this is the ghost of his daughter, where he will be able to see that she is at peace and she is happy and he can receive that closure. But no, it's a killer and John dies. That's the end of the story. And I really just find it fascinating because it shows how a person's stubborn mentality can be their downfall. And I really like the fact that it really shows the differences between genders in this story, such as the docile female who's ready to receive that closure and to make peace and such, versus the dominant, stubborn man who is just not going to hear it and he wants to be rational about everything. So that was a really good interpretation of gender emotions. The second story I want to touch on is the birds. And in this, we have a man named Nat who is a farmhand, and it ends up where he and his family are taking refuge in their home, which this is the nuclear family setting. And they board themselves up inside of their home because a few days ago, this cold air came in and it literally changed the weather from being pleasant to winter overnight. And with this, all of the birds have gone insane. They've started killing people, and all anyone has the option to do is just to board themselves up in their home and hope for the best. And what's really interesting about this is, compared to the movie, the story is so simple. There's no complex character development or anything of the sort, but there is a story. This is a story of multiple layers, and I'll get onto that in the thoughts section. But the thing that I really was impressed by was the ending. And this impressed me when I first read it in junior high in literature class. And when I revisited it, it still had the same impact, which at the end of the story, everything is gone. And you have where Nat and his family have been listening to the radio, and their radio stations have gone out because of the destruction that the birds have caused. And so they try to tap into other radio stations from other countries, and those are also disconnected because of what the birds have done. So it's the idea that this isn't just a regional thing, it's a global thing. And we get the idea at the end of the story that there's nothing left except Nat and his family. And this really makes me think that if I were in that circumstance, would I really have the gumption to continue life? I mean, if everything's gone, would I just risk myself going elsewhere to try to find society? Or would I just give up and say, hey, it was a good show. Peace out. The final story I want to talk about is Monte Veretta. And I don't believe there's been a movie done of this one yet, but if there is ever an adaptation of this story, I would love to see Ari Aster do the adaptation, because it focuses on spirituality, cult-like mentality, and religion in general, which I feel like that's already something he's covered with films such as Hereditary and Midsommar. So I really feel he would be ideal to do justice to this story. Now, the concept here is you have a narrator who is friends with a man named Victor. And the narrator and Victor have been friends for a long time, and their sport is mountain climbing. Well, eventually, Victor meets this mysterious woman named Anna, and they get married, and so, believe it or not, the three of them actually do very well together. They become a really tight-knit group of friends, and they spend holidays together, and they spend quality time together, and everything's just fine and dandy. Well, one day you have where Victor explains that he and Anna are going to go on holiday, and she's going to climb her first mountain, and she does so and really enjoys it. And so they decide to go on another holiday where they encounter Monte Veretta. And as they're in the village around this mountain, they discover a lot of the villagers are secretive, they're to themselves, they're really unwelcoming and not friendly whatsoever. But you have Victor and Anna who decide to climb Monte Veretta regardless, and with it getting late, they decide to overnight at a stranger's house. And the next day when Victor wakes up, he discovers that Anna has continued the climb without him, and she has entered a gated community atop Monte Veretta, which she now refuses to leave, and he is not welcome to become a part of. Well, as the story continues, the narrator and Victor, their paths cross once again, and it's more so by fate. It feels like it's by fate that they reunite. And it's as the narrator is climbing Monte Veretta, you have Victor who is staying at a stranger's home because Victor is now on his deathbed. And he explains everything to the narrator of what happened, and he wants the narrator to go atop Monte Veretta and get Anna to bring her back down so Victor can see her one last time before she dies. Well, the narrator does so. He goes up on top of Monte Veretta. He sees that it is a gated community, and Anna has become a part of the cult that's living up there. And the thing is, even though cult has such a negative vibe that goes along with the word, the context of which this story is written is this negative, brooding vibe. It honestly feels like at any time you're about to witness a tragedy like at what happened with Jim Jones or something like that, it feels like you're about to see another Jonestown here. But that never happens. And the thing is, once the narrator gets beyond the gates and he's able to speak with Anna, he sees that she is completely happy. He sees that this is a peaceful community who has never harmed anyone, and they are literally living in this utopian nirvana where they have no need to go beyond the gates because they are at peace. Well, he explains to Anna what's going on with Victor, and he explains to those in the community that the villagers are planning to bring everyone down because they're jealous. They want to destroy Monte Veretta and kill everyone who's living within that community. And so Anna refuses to come down, and she simply explains to let Victor know that she's at peace and she's happy, and so that comes and goes. But the thing is, when the villagers come up to Monte Veretta to destroy everything and kill everybody, there's no one up there. Everyone has vanished into thin air and they're never seen or heard from again. Now, I kind of feel like maybe one of two things happened here. I feel like maybe on a positive note, they ascended and they were able to escape the evil hands of those in the village below. Another aspect is, and this is simply because of the context to which the story is written, because of how dark and gloomy this utopian nirvana sort of deal is painted out, it feels like maybe these people went into a secret place of hiding and just committed a mass suicide. And so I'm torn between one of those two conclusions. But if you ever read this story, or if you have read this story, and you will know exactly what I'm speaking of when I say I've never read of something so peaceful described as something so dark and creepy. I would like to use this opportunity to talk about John in the story Don't Look Now. As I previously mentioned, this story really does show a good gender difference in a mentality and emotional state between man and woman. Now, with this story, you do have Laura, who has achieved peace for the first time since her daughter has died, and you have a psychic to thank for this, because the psychic is like, no, your daughter Christine, she's happy in the afterlife. She wants you and John to be at peace. She wants you to move on with your life. And this is exactly what Laura needed to achieve the inner peace and to just make closure. And she even says that it feels like there's a weight that's been lifted off of her. Well, John, who is the skeptic and headstrong guy, his downfall is he's an arrogant asshole. And he's not afraid to show he's an arrogant asshole even to his wife, which he says, oh, don't trust the psychic. She was just a con artist. Or, take what she said with a grain of salt. Don't believe that. And, I'm like, what kind of an asshole do you have to be to try to rob your wife of what she has finally found peace with by your rationalizations of what's really going on? That's a shitty thing to do. That's really asinine. And had I been someone sitting in that restaurant overhearing what John said, I would have grabbed him by the back of the head, face planted him into the table, and just simply walked away. But that didn't happen, even though I wish it would have. Now, another aspect about John that I want to touch on here is he's in that whole mentality that men shouldn't cry. He's the ideal person who is like, to be anything less than just a strong-willed man, you're seen as being a diminished man. You're seen as being something that is just not living to its full potential of what a man should be. And I've never understood that bullshit mentality. I'm like, you know what? Cry. be more in touch with your feminine side. Because the thing is, what's the harm in doing so? You are a human being. You should not have to fall into like gender norms or what's expected of a gender. And that's just, I've always thought being trapped in that mentality is pure bullshit. I mean, I cry. It's no problem to be a man and cry. Hell, the last time I cried, I was sitting in a theater as Bradley Cooper hung himself and Lady Gaga was like, I ain't ever gonna love again. I sat right there in that chair shoving popcorn down my throat crying like a little bitch. And so my thing is, just get in touch with your emotions and don't be an asshole. Don't rob someone else of something that's made them happy, even if you don't believe in it. Overall, there are 3 stories in this book that are absolutely outstanding. And those are The Birds, Don't Look Now, and Monte Veretta. The 3 stories that I feel are honorable mentions, and they're still good stories, are The Blue Lenses, Split Second, and Kiss Me Again, Stranger. But the 3 stories that honestly did nothing for me whatsoever are Indiscretion, Escort, and La Santa Verge, which that last one is translated into The Virgin Saint. But I really feel the missed opportunity here is with the story Escort. And I say that because this story is about a ghost ship. And the story honestly feels like it just goes nowhere. It's so mildly written that it's a letdown after everything else I've read in this book. And it really feels like with what du Maurier can do with mystery, suspense, and just terror and in general, it really feels like she could have done something a lot more with this, but it just didn't happen. Now, message-wise, I would like to focus on my 3 favorite stories here. And the first one would be Don't Look Now. Pretty much with this story, I feel that it urges people to make peace with their grief, especially when it's in regards to losing a loved one. And it also urges people to keep an open mind. Now, with this story, du Maurier does a superb job of character development, and especially for the time in which this story takes place, we see how the dominant male and the docile female react to the same subject that is the meat of this story. And I do feel that the story becomes a cautionary tale because it really urges for people to look before they leap and to keep an open mind. If you don't look before you leap and you are closed-minded, these issues could mean your downfall later in life. Now, with the second story, The Birds, this is more complex than the previous story, and it's definitely more complex than the Hitchcock movie. And the thing is, with the Hitchcock movie, you had a relationship between the main characters. Well, in the short story, those characters don't exist, but we do get a few different speculations of why the birds are attacking. Now, one character says that she thinks maybe the Russians have created something nuclear and this has affected the birds where they are attacking humankind. And this fear is kind of justified because the story does take place after World War II. The second speculation is the cold snap that has come in overnight has messed with the birds' equilibriums, it's driven them south, it's agitated them, and it's caused them to act outside of their norm, and they are attacking people because of that. The third speculation is humans have had the run of the world way too long, they have taken over way too much, and now nature is rebelling against them. And any of these subjects could be justifiable for this story. Now, pretending that this is an environmental horror story, and we are to blame for what has happened, this could be why there is such a great importance on the cold snap in the story, because we as human beings have screwed up the world. The climate is now changing just rapidly and quickly, and this is showing us what is going to come of our world if it continues to mess up due to our actions. And also, if it were to be an environmental horror story, we could totally see where we have taken everything for granted and we have definitely just invaded land that wasn't ours to start with. And because of this, we have caused, I guess, an imbalance with nature. But if the story is war-based, as in human to human war based, and there are nuclear reasons for the birds acting this way, we could totally see where this is a lingering fear of persons during that time after World War II, wondering what's going to happen next and when their safety is going to be invaded. But despite the fact of if the reason is human related or nature related, there are total war references throughout the whole story. And what I mean by that is with the birds, you have where people have taken refuge in their homes, and there's a very strong feel to this that's similar to what people might have done in bomb shelters when their country was under attack by another country. And then also with the birds, you have where different species have joined together to attack humans. There is a very great similarity between this and how other countries form allies and attack another country. And another subject that I really felt touched on war in general were the scenes where birds were considered to be kamikazing themselves into the homes and such. And so this was also another thing that was important during World War II, were the kamikaze pilots. And so no matter how you look at this, the birds is very deeply war related. The final story I want to touch on is Monte Veretta, and this is written in a context that is so damn creepy. And even though the subject matter isn't creepy at all, and what goes down in the story is actually really peaceful, the way du Maurier presents this, it's creepy as hell. But the story really shows what happens when a person leaves behind their world to join a religious sect, or maybe go off to find their own utopia, or to join a cult or something like that. And so it really shows an emotional sense of what happens when a person leaves behind everything else, people included. So that was the main story that I really just felt blew me away out of all three of them, was Monte Veretta. That one, it's phenomenal. It's probably my favorite one out of everything in this book. I highly recommend Don't Look Now. It has a great diversity of du Maurier's talents, and if you've never read du Maurier before, this is really a great introduction piece. And if you want something that is suitable for a rainy day or just a gloomy day in general, this is an ideal book for you to cuddle up in your recliner with a cup of tea and just get ready to be creeped out. On to the questions. The first question is, what is a female horror author you would recommend? And what is a good first book that you would recommend by this author? Load up the comments. The next question I have is, since du Maurier ended up finding a lot of inspiration in her travels, what is a place that inspires you to create? Personally, for me, it would be New Orleans. And the reason why I say that is because New Orleans is just full of mysticism and history, rich music, rich food, and it all just kind of comes together in this big boiling pot that just feels like it's a big inspiration. So that would be my place. And so I would love to learn about where you've gone on vacation and you've become inspired by that location and why. So again, load up the comments. With everything covered, it's now time that I conclude this video, and this is where I give a shout out to Lisa G and Joseph Baylock for contributing to my Patreon account. So thank you for being contributors. If you would like to contribute as well, just go to the description section of this video and you'll see that I have a link provided for my Patreon. And this is so you can donate $5 a month, and for that I'll give you a shout out at the end of my video. And if you're a creator of some sort, definitely let me know that you are a creator in your Patreon contribution, and I'll give you a shout out, such as you being an author, an artist, artist, a movie maker, anything of the sort. So I'll give you that extra plug. But if you are unable to contribute, there's no sweat whatsoever. I'm still going to be making videos because these videos are just for fun and to connect with the horror community. So if you're unable to contribute, all I ask is that you just simply continue coming back to this channel and we continue having a good time together. If you would like to connect with me on social media, links to my Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram are all in the description section of this video. And if you have not subscribed to my channel yet, be sure to subscribe and hit that notifications bell because I have tons of other book reviews coming in the near future. So until next time, I hope you have a great week and sweet nightmares.